Why was she the only one who noticed that dust trail didn't belong? The valley below shimmered in early light, a soft mirage of heat and silence. From a distance, it looked peaceful, untouched. But Reena knew better. She lay flat against the rocky ridge, cheek pressed into the stock of her rifle, every bone in her body anchored to stillness. The netting over her shoulders fluttered faintly as wind pushed in from the southwest, not a gust, but a whisper. Dust lifted, danced for a moment, then vanished. Like most truths in war, it didn't stay visible for long. Her thumb flicked upward, the beads on her wrist responded. One shifted, subtle and precise, a rhythm of breath and timing, nothing mechanical, no battery-powered sensor, just muscle memory and a prayer strung on nylon. Down below, the first Mr. AP vehicle crept into view, tires throwing up curls of beige sand. Reena didn't move, she didn't blink. Her optics stayed fixed on the switchback road, not on the vehicle, but on the edge just ahead of it. That was where the sand had shifted strangely. Not like wind, not like rain. Something or someone had disturbed it recently, and no one else had said a word. The radio crackled. She was probably tracking tumbleweeds. A male voice, relaxed, slightly amused. Reena didn't respond. Another voice joined in, deeper, slower. This place is dead. Should have left her on station command. Nothing out here but lizards. Still, she said nothing. Her finger stayed outside the trigger guard. Calm, focused. But in her gut, there was weight. It wasn't pride, or anger, or even the need to be right. It was a feeling she couldn't shake, the memory of the last time she hadn't been listened to, when she logged a pattern, when she marked a ridge 3 clicks out, and when her call was filed under non-critical. The team rolled into an ambush 6 hours later. No deaths, but blood spilled, bone broken, medevacs flying through dust and confusion. That report was never brought up again, neither was her name. Until now. She adjusted her scope slightly, a half-click correction for elevation. The optic flickered briefly in the rising haze, a mirage of clarity in a world that refused to offer any, and she waited. This was her post, her burden, a job without praise. No medals, no spotlight, just a long, slow watch across a corridor of exposure where death could hide under a single stone. One breath, in 4-4, out 4-5. The wind pressed across her jaw again. From the west, 2.5 knots. Building, but steady. She made a note in her notebook. Air temp, light angle, wind pattern. Not for poetry, for math. Ballistics cared nothing for feeling. Another voice on comes, younger this time, almost bored. If we get contact, it won't be from up there. Too quiet. Besides, we've got eyes. She's just logging ours. A flicker of something passed through Reena's chest. Not anger. Recognition. She'd heard that same tone once before, just before a convoy hit a triad of buried charges. She'd warned them then too. An unusual heat signature, a shadow that bent to wrong. And still, they called it foliage interference. Static in the data. They reassigned her the next day. Another shooter took the hill. That shooter didn't come back. Now, another hill, another warning, and another convoy slowly easing through the valley. The second MRAP entered her frame. The dust rose higher this time, a ribbon pulled sideways by the same wind brushing her cheek. Reena adjusted her windage to 3.0 left. Her rifle felt like part of her, not an object, a limb. The valley was wide open, no clear threats, but something didn't sit right. Her optic drifted back to the outcrop of stones she'd marked earlier. A natural break, covered in sun-bleached rock and brush. And yet, the shadow line had changed. Slightly. Enough. She adjusted her magnification, not to confirm a target, to ask a question. What moved? She slowed her breath. A hawk circled overhead. She tracked it with her eyes but didn't shift the scope. Predators understood terrain better than any map. When it banked east, she noted the angle. It wasn't hunting. It was watching. Her thumb flicked the second bead. The time was nearing, and that's when the shimmer pulsed, not from heat, but from something solid beneath it. The air bent, not over rock, but over shape. Reena's breath slowed. Heartbeat stayed even. 60. The beads didn't shift, yet something inside her stirred. Not fear, certainty. She scanned again. A dark form crouched behind the outcrop, chest to ground, mesh netting over the head. Movement too slow for wildlife, too precise. She didn't need full detail. She already knew. A trigger man, lying in wait, right arm partially raised, Coiled wire looped in his fingers. The dust trail led directly to the road. Manual detonation. He was waiting for the fourth axle to cross the blast zone. She checked range. 165 meters. Elevation drop just under 12. Her finger still didn't touch the trigger. She watched his hand, his posture. He wasn't unsure. He was trained. This wasn't desperation, it was calculation. The convoy kept moving. Reena didn't flinch. The voice from earlier returned on. Comes. Clear route ahead. Pushing through. They didn't see what she saw. They didn't know what waited 10 seconds ahead, and she didn't have time to explain. The man adjusted his hand. His thumb hovered over the device, just a breath away from fire. Reena touched her final bead. Then, she whispered into the stone beside her. Words meant, for no one, I see you. Her breathing stilled. The scope was her eye. The world beyond was narrowed to truth. This was the moment. Not decided by rank. Not confirmed by report. Not commanded from above, but felt, trusted, known. And just as the fourth MRAP's shadow entered the trigger zone, she pressed down the rifle, whispered. Not a blast, a breath. The round struck below his right eye. No recoil, no flinch, just the sudden end of intent. The man collapsed in place, silent. Still, the clacker rolled from his hand and caught on the stone. Below, the convoy kept moving. No fire, no death, just motion, continuing forward, unaware that someone they never saw had just saved every breath they didn't lose. And on the ridge, Reena didn't move. Not to take credit, not to be seen, only to watch, to confirm that the quiet for now had returned. Why do some people only believe you after it's already too late? The radio lit up, panicked voices cutting across the comm. Movement, ridge, someone's down. Another voice followed, sharper now. Eyes on, looks like a body. What the hell is that? Silence hit next. A kind that doesn't come from confusion. But realization. Reena kept her cheek to the rifle's comb, scope still trained on the shadow where the man had fallen. Through her optic, the valley looked untouched, except for the motionless body and the faint trail of disturbed dust curling off the ledge like a final breath. She scanned quickly. A sweep of the hills. No second shooter. No hidden backup. He was alone. The threat. Real. The decision. Right. And still. She didn't exhale. Not yet. Her heartbeat hadn't changed. Neither had her posture. Her finger hovered over the trigger, resting lightly along the guard. Safety on. Chambers still live. She waited. Below, 2 SEALs dismounted from the third MRAP. One moved fast and low, toward the rocks. The other circled out wide, flanking, rifle steady, body language tense. Reena watched their movements, professional, trained. They weren't moving like men who still thought it had been just lizards. 30 seconds passed. Then a new voice, this time slower, more grounded. Got a device. Clackers here. Wired. We were a second out. No commentary followed. No jokes. Just wait. They were too close to death for laughter now. Up on the ridge, Reena reached for her notebook. She flipped to a clean line and logged the shot. Shot confirmed. Range, 165 meters. Wind, 2.2 left. Outcome, neutralized. She didn't write a comment. What more was there to say? Her optic swept the road again, not just for protocol, for certainty. No additional threats. No secondary team. No movement in the brush. No glint off glass. No unnatural shadows. It was over, at least for now. And yet her body remained still, not stiff, but anchored. The kind of stillness you don't get from training, only from experience, only from having waited before, hesitated before, paid the price before. She rolled her left shoulder slightly, enough to ease the pressure without breaking form. Her beads pressed into her wrist, warm from skin contact. Below, the fourth vehicle crossed the kill line. Nothing happened, no blast, no fire. Just the dull hum of engines moving forward, unaware that survival had already been decided for them, not by luck, but by someone they never saw. A voice crackled over comms. It was the same one who'd joked about tumbleweeds. But this time, his tone had changed. It was her. That was all. No apology. No thanks. Just an acknowledgement. And it was enough. Reena didn't key the mic. She didn't speak. Her eye remained to the scope, observing as the SEALs regrouped, adjusted formation, and tagged the clacker with a glow stick. The body was left in place. There was nothing to extract on. Another voice came through, the command tone now carrying something different. Respect, maybe. At the very least, awareness. All elements. Overwatch confirms neutralization. Confirm. Shot origin. A beat, then silence, and again. The voice. It was her. The wind shifted softly across the ridge, stirring the netting draped over her shoulders. Dust lifted from the dead man's boot, arcing in a slow spiral before disappearing into sunlight. She reset the bolt with a smooth, practiced pull. Next, round-chambered, safety on. No one told her to. No one needed to. This wasn't over because the radio went quiet. It was over when she said it was. She scanned the terrain one last time, checking for movement, runners, or hidden triggers, confirming her shot hadn't alerted others. It hadn't. She closed her notebook. The page had already dried. Wiping graphite from her fingers, she leaned back from the glass, her first movement in nearly an hour. The scope fogged faintly from the heat of her face. She blinked once. Long, full, reset. The valley shimmered again. Same heat, same light. But something felt different now. Not in the terrain, but in the weight of her body. In the knowing. She'd held the line again. And this time, they knew it. The wheels touched down just after dusk. No spotlight. No fanfare. Just a hiss of hydraulics as the ramp lowered onto cracked tarmac, still warm from the sun. Reena stepped off the transport, rucksack low on her back. Rifle case secured to the side. Dust clung to the hem of her pants. And she walked without ceremony. Boots meeting painted concrete with the same silence that defined the rest of her work. No one waited. She hadn't expected them to. Far across the motor pool, 4 vehicles pulled in, dirt-streaked antenna bent slightly from terrain. The same convoy, the same men, alive. Some climbed out slowly, helmets in hand, postured like survivors, not just of terrain, but of the moment they almost didn't know was theirs. One looked toward her, didn't hold her gaze. Another rubbed his eyes, avoiding hers entirely. It wasn't disrespect, it was weight, the weight of knowing they had passed through something razor-thin, and someone they never saw had made sure they got through it. Then a figure approached. Steady walk, no rush, no weapon slung, just a device in hand. It was the operator who'd made the tumbleweed joke, his gait stiff from armor, his eyes darker than before. He stopped 2 feet from her. No hostility, no pride, just silence. The honest kind. He held out the placard. Reena nodded once, not to accept it, just to acknowledge what it meant. He didn't ask anything, didn't thank her. He stepped back, gave a half-turn, and rejoined the others. Sometimes, dignity says nothing. Inside the debrief tent, lights glowed soft through canvas. The smell of dry fabric and printed reports hung in the air. A field table held forms, most already signed. The operations officer looked up. No speech, just tapped a folder. Convoy returned. No injuries, shot confirmed. 1 kill, 1 save. He didn't ask for comment. She didn't offer one. Reena signed, nodded, and left. Her boots barely made a sound. No one followed. No one needed to. Why does silence haunt more than explosions ever could? Reena sat in her bunk that night, back against the wall, her rifle case unopened at her feet. The tent was quiet, too quiet. Outside, laughter echoed from a fire pit where a few of the younger operators blew off steam. Exaggerated stories growing taller with every breath of freedom they didn't know they'd nearly lost. She didn't join them. Not because she couldn't. Because she remembered the feeling of carrying someone else's survival, like a secret. You don't toast to that, you carry it. The cot creaked slightly as she leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on a small, worn photograph taped to the inside of her locker door. A girl in a school uniform, laughing, holding a small kite. Her sister, Seema, gone 10 years now, not from war, not from violence, from the same thing that haunted Reena, in the field, silence. The kind that follows when no one listens, when the system forgets the quiet ones. Seema had reported the signs, told the school, told their mother, told the police, and still, no one moved until it was too late. Reena had found her in that dim hospital room, bruises like fingerprints, lips cracked from fear. She hadn't cried, just looked at Reena and asked one question. Why didn't they believe me? It was the last thing she ever said. And from that day forward, Reena had vowed never to look away again, never to be the one who didn't listen, even if everyone else laughed, doubted, ignored, even if it made her an outsider. She reached for her beads, the same nylon cord she'd woven herself from boot camp days. Each one marked something, not kills, not missions, moments she knew, moments when the world turned a blind eye, and she chose not to. She rolled one bead between her fingers, the third from the end. Today's bead. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like breath, a heartbeat that kept going, a convoy that kept rolling. Morning came with the chill of early winds, flapping canvas and distant rotor blades warming on the HELIPAD. Orders were waiting, not a commendation, not a medal, just a slip, redeployment, op Thornvale, effective immediately, no briefing, no map, just a time, for 40 hours, just coordinates, and the signature of a commander who never looked her in the eye. She folded the slip once, then twice, and tucked it into her boot. Thornvale. The name rang through her like a warning bell. Only one unit was operating in that zone, Black Watch-9. Recon, snipers, shadow operators, ghosts, even among the elite. They didn't work with outsiders, they didn't accept command oversight, and yet, they'd requested a sniper for OVERWATCH. Specifically. Her stomach tightened, but not from nerves, from memory. 2 years ago, she'd crossed paths with Black Watch 9 in a failed mountain extraction. Her shot had saved one of their own from a rooftop ambush. A clean kill at 220 meters, wind slicing through like a knife. She never saw their faces, never heard a thank you. But someone had remembered, and now they were calling her in. The chopper lifted. Before sunrise, desert spilled out below her like a wound cracked, glowing with first light, silent. Reena sat across from 3 Black Watch operatives, no names, no conversation, faces half hidden beneath face wraps and dark goggles. One of them nodded to her once, the barest hint of respect, no rank, no patch, only presence. She didn't try to speak. There was nothing to ask. She knew this type of mission, knew what silence meant here. The type where backup doesn't come. Where rescue isn't expected, where a single breath can shift the outcome of a nation's secret. 2 hours later, the bird kissed the edge of a red cliff and hovered just long enough for the team to drop. No dust kicked up, no gear left unsecured. Reena hit the ground last, boots firm on shale, and turned to catch the chopper, vanishing like a ghost into the blue. She was alone, except for them. One of the men handed her a wristband encrypted comes, no words. Then motioned east. And they moved, no sound. No explanation, just terrain in tension. By dusk, they reached the ridge, and Reena saw it, a compound buried deep in the hills, built into the stone, half visible from above, the rest tunneled inward like a beast hiding in the mountain's ribs. A cartel stronghold, not drugs. Information. The kind of data wars are shaped by. Inside, a courier, holding drives containing names of informants, agents, defectors. If leaked, hundreds would burn. The mission was simple: take him alive, or kill him before he crosses the border. But there was a problem. The drop zone was cold, too cold. No guards, no patrols, no movement in or out. A classic dead hive, which meant one thing. Trap. Reena scanned the compound with her scope. Every window dark, every camera fixed in place. Nothing shifted, except one thing. A curtain, a red one, blowing from inside a window. Though no wind touched the ground, she noted the time, the light, the angle. And frowned. Because red cloth doesn't flutter inward when there's no draft, unless someone's behind it watching, pulling it deliberately. She adjusted her windage, again, tracked the upper floors, and saw it, a flash, not light, glass, a scope, pointed up. At her. How do you take a breath when the air itself feels like a lie? The glint disappeared. Just for a second, but that was all Reena needed. Someone had eyes on the ridge, her ridge. She didn't move, not even a blink, because sudden movement when you're already painted is suicide. Instead, she let her breath settle, let the beads in her wrist press into her skin, grounding her. Then, like a whisper to the earth, she shifted 3 inches left behind a knot of stone, never breaking her line of sight. Her heartbeat still calm. This wasn't panic. This was math. Someone had her in their sights, which meant someone had predicted her position. Not guessed, predicted. Her hide had been compromised, which meant one of two things. Either the cartel had built counter-sniper logic into their perimeter, or Blackwatch was lying. She adjusted her elevation dial, one click at a time. The glint hadn't come from the usual tower. It was lower, flatter, positioned south by a hair. That's not where snipers sit, unless they're trying to blend in, unless they want to bait the counterfire. This wasn't just surveillance. It was a duel, and only one person could win. Reena narrowed her eye and slowed her breathing. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. Her optic narrowed into tunnel vision. Everything else faded. Then, a flicker. Inside the window, movement again. This time, not a scope, a lens. Longer, broader, a camera. Recording why. She drew in a deeper breath. Her mind traced over every detail. Cold zone, no guards, scope flash, followed by a camera. This wasn't a trap for them. It was a setup for her. She felt the chill rise across her spine, like fog. Someone wanted her to take the shot. Someone wanted a sniper kill, on tape. For propaganda, for blackmail, for internal burn. She didn't know, but she knew bait when she saw it. And this was poison honey. Click. She locked the safety. Didn't fire, didn't breathe, just watched. 10 seconds passed, then 20. Then the camera lens withdrew, vanishing like a blink into shadow. She'd called the bluff. Behind her, the lead, Blackwatch operative finally crept to a halt beside her position. He didn't speak, just lowered into a crouch, one eye hidden behind mirrored lenses. He didn't ask what she'd seen, because he already knew. Reena turned her head, slowly, and said nothing. But her eyes burned into his. He gave a single nod, as if to say, now, you understand. Later, when the sun dipped low and the air turned copper and silent, Blackwatch made their move. No gunfire. No breach. Just infiltration. They weren't storming the compound. They were entering it, quietly, and they left her behind, alone again. But this time, it didn't feel like exclusion. It felt like insulation. Like they were keeping her out of something, which meant the real objective wasn't just the courier. It was the setup. They knew she'd be targeted. They knew cameras would be rolling. And they'd brought her anyway. Not for her rifle, but for her name. 30 minutes passed, no shots, no alerts, nothing but the slow pull of moonlight across the canyon floor. And then, a flicker. Movement. One figure emerging from the lower mouth of the compound. Not Blackwatch. Civilian. Tall, thin hands bound, head covered. The courier. And trailing him to shadows, Blackwatch escorts. Reena dropped back behind the scope, scanned the upper ridges, confirmed no snipers. Nothing moved, until something did. From the east, a dust trail, small, fast, low, to the ground, a bike. Single rider. No lights, moving with intent. She radioed in, unidentified vehicle, east approach, time to contact, 90 seconds, no response. She repeated, still nothing. Blackwatch wasn't answering. She flipped to the emergency band. Same silence. This was beyond comms. Failure. It was denial. They'd cut her out, on purpose. She ran the math in her head. Courier, exposed. Extraction, still 5 minutes out. Enemy rider inbound, too fast to stop with ground team, too far for Blackwatch to reach. That left one variable. She dialed in. Wind, 3.1 right, drop. Negligible at this range. Target speed, 80 kph. Distance, 420 meters. Margin, less than 6 inches. She exhaled, let the beads tighten on her wrist, and whispered, not today. Cracked the round, left like breath from God. No echo, just dust, then silence. The bike tilted, spun, and collapsed. The rider slid 20 feet, rolled once, and didn't rise. She held the scope steady, confirmed he wasn't dead, but he wasn't moving either. The threat was neutralized. Again. 3 minutes later, the extraction bird dipped into the valley. Courier loaded, Blackwatch boarded. No one looked up at her ridge. No signals. No nods. They left as if she didn't exist, as if none of it had happened. But she'd seen it. Every lie, every silence, every camera flash. And she knew something now. She wasn't the one being protected. She was the distraction. When do you stop being a soldier and start becoming the evidence? The desert wind returned as the chopper faded into horizon silence. Another ghost, swallowed by sunburnt dust. Reena remained motionless on the ridge, her rifle lowered but her eyes sharp. Still no radio contact, no extraction, no acknowledgement. She wasn't just alone now. She was deliberately alone. Her shot had stopped the bike. Clean, professional, prevented a threat. but something twisted inside her. Not doubt, not guilt. Recognition. She was the only person who hadn't entered that compound, the only one not in the camera's frame, and somehow, that made her the only one clean. The courier had been removed alive. Blackwatch had what they needed, so why silence her comes? Why leave her on the ridge? And why bait her with a sniper glint that never fired? She packed her rifle slowly, like it might explode. Each click and snap of the case felt louder than the gunfire itself. Her hands moved on instinct, the way they had 1,000 times before. But her thoughts didn't follow orders. They wandered, replayed the red curtain. The lens, the trap, and the nod. That subtle, casual nod from the Blackwatch leader. Not of partnership, but permission. Now you understand. Understand that this wasn't a mission. That she was part of a larger play. A deeper cover story. Because if she hadn't taken the shot on that ridge, what would have happened to the courier? Would he have been allowed to live? Or would Blackwatch have executed him, and blamed her bullet? She reached the LZ by foot, just past midnight. No lights. No signal flares. Just a burned-out smoke canister on the ground, still warm. Whoever had called the bird had already scrubbed the evidence. But one thing caught her attention. Boot prints. Too many for the Blackwatch team. At least 8. No drag marks from the courier. Just boots. That meant someone else had arrived. Someone not in the original opt. She crouched low and touched the prints. They were light, not military tread. Lighter. Gear. Intel agents. Or worse, internal affairs. Back at forward base dagger. The lights flickered when she entered the talk. The watch officer looked up from a screen. Startled. Didn't know you were out, he said. She paused. They didn't log my departure. He shook his head. Nope, no op tags, no movement listed. You weren't on the manifest. Reena felt her pulse tighten but kept her face flat. You have access to the tower records? She asked. Only last 24 hours. Why? She didn't answer. Just stepped behind the console, keyed the request. Outbound flight log, 0700Z, 2200Z. The list appeared. She scanned fast. Her bird wasn't listed. Blackwatch's ride, unlisted. The extraction bird listed, but under a different call. Sin, Red Phantom. That wasn't a military designation. That was agency. She scrolled down. Manifest, classified, passenger log, redacted crew, unlisted. It wasn't a rescue mission. It was a handoff. The courier had never been meant to reach HQ. He'd been sent directly to blacksite custody. No trial. No oversight. No witness. Unless, of course, someone saw too much. Someone like Reena. She walked out into the night air. The base smelled of jet fuel and denial. Above her, stars stared down, unblinking. She walked past the barracks, past the fire pit, past the row of hung-up helmets and unspoken truths. She stopped at her tent. And waited. 30 minutes passed. Then, a figure approached. Not military. Civilian clothes. To clean. To still. Agency. You took a difficult shot today, he said, voice even. She didn't answer. He didn't need her to. We reviewed your footage. Clean, impressive work. Still, she said nothing. The man smiled. Not warmth, just teeth. You neutralized the courier's tail. Protected a Tier 1 operation. And did so without oversight. A pause. Not many operators can say that. Reena stared. He adjusted his cuffs. We're assembling a new team. Quiet work, not official, but necessary. We're offering you first seat. She raised an eyebrow. Because I didn't pull the trigger at the compound. Because you knew not to. That landed hard. And clear. She hadn't just passed a test. She'd been the test. The man reached into his coat, produced a sealed envelope. No markings. Left it on her cot. Think about it. Then he vanished. Like smoke in moonlight. Inside the envelope, a photo of the courier cuffed blindfolded, mouth open mid-scream. A flash drive, labeled in red, Thornvale, raw footage, 1907, and a note, handwritten. Simple, double quotes. Not everything hidden is dirty. Some things are hidden. To stay pure. Reena sat down on the edge of her bunk, looked at the flash. Drive. Then her beads. Then the sky. She didn't feel righteous, didn't feel proud. She just felt seen. And that was more dangerous than any sniper's bullet, because now they knew. She didn't miss. She didn't question. And worst of all, she paid attention. If you were never meant to remember, why were you the only one who can't forget? Reena didn't sleep. Not that night. Not really. She sat on her cot in the dim yellow light, envelope untouched on her knee, flash drive cold in her hand. The voices of soldiers echoed faintly from the courtyard. Normal sounds, card games, boots scraping gravel, bursts of laughter. But inside her, it was still Thornvale. Still that red curtain. Still the blinking eye of the camera. She plugged the drive into her field laptop. Encrypted channel offline, Wi-Fi disabled. The footage began. No intro, no timestamp, just static. Then an overhead, drone shot of the compound. She recognized the ridgeline she'd lain on. Her, spot. The screen, JITTER ed. Cut to helmet cam. Someone entering the compound. One of the Blackwatch team. The courier was already in the center room. Bound, head down. 2 guards stood behind him. Not cartel. American gear. One spoke. Audio was muffled, but Reena isolated the words. We're burning the aliases. He's a leak risk. The courier struggled. I came to trade. I gave you everything. You said protection. The second man responded flatly. And now you're the threat. A silenced pistol raised. The courier screamed. But the gun didn't fire. Another voice cut in different tone. Calmer, sharper. Wait, we need her to see this. Her. Reena froze. The camera panned upward past the window where the red curtain had fluttered out. Toward her ridge she saw herself. A speck of black against stone. The voice returned. She's the only one with a clean shot. If she pulls the trigger, we burn the trail. Another pause. If she doesn't, we proceed clean. Clean. The word spun in her head. Like a rifle bolt. She hadn't just been bait. She'd been the deciding factor. Her decision determined whether the man lived or died. The footage jumped again. Now, the body was gone. The floor stained. The agents were dragging something wrapped in plastic toward the compound. Exit. The audio buzzed. GLITCHED. Then cut to black. End of file. No. Courier. No. Team. Just silence. Reena stared at the screen, felt the weight of the drive in her palm, felt the tremble that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with clarity. They never needed her rifle. They needed her reputation. The ghost sniper who never missed. If the courier died, they'd claim she took the shot from 400 meters. Plausible, believable, clean, but she hadn't. She chose not to. And now they had a problem. She saw too much and left no mess that made her unuseful, but dangerous. 3 nights later, she received new orders. Temporary reassignment, Delta Base, logistics, that was code, shelf duty, a slow fade into irrelevance. She wasn't being promoted or punished. She was being erased, quietly. She didn't argue, didn't ask questions. She packed her gear with precision, left the beads behind, and when the convoy arrived, she climbed in without a word. Delta Base wasn't a base, it was an outpost. Tinru, buildings, empty towers, a skeleton crew of nobodies, the kind of place forgotten by both maps and memory. They gave her a bunk near the fuel depot. No rifle. No COMMS, just a clipboard and a headcount list. Her new job, tracking inventory, watching boxers, counting crates, invisible. But in that silence, her mind sharpened, watched patterns, not just the trucks that came and went, but which ones, who signed the manifests, what was never recorded. She saw a pattern twice a week, unmarked trucks, drivers with no names, no tags, just red tape clearance and blank manifests. And every time they left, something in the depot was gone, something not on her list. She followed one truck once, far enough not to be seen, watched it meet a second convoy by the river. 2 men exited. One of them she recognized from Thornvale. No patch, but same walk, same eyes, Blackwatch. Night, under low moonlight, she wrote a name on a slip of paper, folded it, burned it, then walked to the comms hut, unused, dusty. She activated an old backup transmitter, dialed to a secure frequency she wasn't supposed to know, waited, then said a single phrase, observer still active. A pause. Then static, then one response, stay cold. Reena smiled, not because she was safe, but because they'd finally made one mistake. They tried to isolate her, but they'd forgotten the most dangerous thing a sniper learns. Stillness is not silence. Stillness is patience. They erased her from the mission, but they forgot. Ghosts don't disappear. They haunt. Delta Base slept as the desert curled around it like a silent animal, dry, patient, ancient. Reena stood at the depot gate, arms folded, counting headlights. Another unmarked truck. Same clearance. Same blank manifest. Same half smile from the driver that didn't quite reach the eyes. But this time, she wasn't alone. She'd sent the signal 3 nights ago. Observer still active. It was a phrase from an old playbook, one used only between ghosts, between operatives who weren't supposed to exist anymore. She hadn't known if it would reach anyone. But now, something had shifted, not in the base, in the air. That night, she found a note under her bunk. No name, no handwriting, just a printed line of coordinates, and a time, 3:40 Zulu. Reena memorized it, burned the slip. 0330. She left the depot, silent as the moon. No guards stopped her, because there were no guards. Not for her. She wasn't a prisoner. She was a ghost in training. And ghosts don't get locked doors, they get ignored until they vanish. She reached the coordinates on foot, 2 kilometers north of the base, in a dead patch of terrain where even the wind didn't breathe. There was nothing, until the earth blinked. Infrared strobes, tiny ones, invisible to the naked eye, but her optic implant caught them. A signal. Dug. And found it. A capsule, cold steel, coated lock. She entered her call sign, Vale-3. The case clicked open. Inside, a data chip, and a handwritten message on carbon paper. They're not after the courier, they're after what he stole. He took a name, and it wasn't theirs to lose. Reena turned the chip in her fingers. No markings, no ID, encrypted, almost certainly, but she didn't need to crack it. Not yet, because now she knew. This wasn't just a cleanup, this was a cover-up. The courier had flipped, traded intel for asylum, but somewhere in that bargain, he'd slipped one extra piece onto the table. A name, one name. So dangerous. It wasn't on record, so powerful. Even Blackwatch couldn't scrub it without help. That was what the cameras were for. Not to prove Reena fired, but to create a narrative that she had to delete the courier, along with the secret he carried. By dawn, she was back in the depot, routine restored, clipboard in hand, eyes dull, body compliant, but her mind was miles ahead. She had a plan now. Target, but not for a rifle, for truth. Because sometimes, the most dangerous shot is the one that unmasks the shooter. At 1800 that night, the same agency man appeared at Delta Base. No warning. No chopper, just dust, a black SUV, and mirrored sunglasses. He strolled through the gate like he owned gravity. Reena watched him approach. He didn't smile. "You've been busy," he said. Reena shrugged. "Boxers don't count themselves." The man handed her a folder. "Mission, remote outpost, you're back on the line." She didn't take it. Instead, she asked, "Why me?" He hesitated. For just a second. Then, "Because you're clean, because you see, and because you know how to keep your mouth shut." She stepped closer, locked eyes with him. "And what happens when I don't?" A flicker. Tiny. But real. His lips parted, then closed. He didn't have an answer. He thought she was a tool, but tools don't think, and this one had started to ask. He dropped the folder at her feet and walked away. Inside the folder, a fake op. No objective. No target. Just movement. Just relocation. Another test. Another disposal. They were trying to bury her deeper, but Reena had already figured it out. They didn't want to kill her. They wanted her to become someone else. To break her down until she became exactly what they needed. A loyal ghost. A myth that killed on command and forgot why. But they were too late, because Reena had seen the crack in the mirror. And now, she didn't want revenge, she wanted clarity. Not who gave the order, but whose name the courier had carried. The name that made the entire system twist into shadow. The name worth killing, worth lying, worth sacrificing. Reena's silence. That was the center of the spiral, and she was going to find it. Not with violence. Not with vengeance. With precision. Because this wasn't a war anymore. It was a witness hunt. And Reena wasn't just a sniper. She was a recorder of truths, a woman who could kill from a mile away, but now chose to see instead. Every ghost has a name. There's a saying in sniper circles: a bullet forgets, but the shooter remembers. They taught Reena to forget. To compartmentalize. To pull the trigger and walk away, but she remembered everything. The heat of the scope against her cheek. The flutter of that red curtain, the silent scream of the man in the compound. And now, the one thing that no one in command had prepared for, A cofter who remembered. The folder sat untouched on her bunk. Inside, a mission she wouldn't take, a location she wouldn't visit, because today, Reena wasn't obeying orders, she was following a name. She had the drive, she had the coordinates from Thornvale. And now, after decrypting the capsule from the desert, she had one more thing, a list, a short one, just 4 names. 3 of them she recognized, Blackwatch Brass, deep cover, but the 4th, Dr. Kellen Voss, a civilian. Not military. Not agency, not even listed on any clearance logs, but Reena dug deeper. He wasn't invisible, he was deleted, scrubbed. His medical license revoked 5 years ago, no charges, no trial. Just gone but a whisper. In an old op report, redacted beyond recognition, linked Voss to a psychiatric program run out of a shell hospital in northern Syria, and to one very specific line, preoperative conditioning of Tier 1 assets. Preoperative, not post. They weren't treating trauma, they were designing obedience. And Reena had been on that list, years ago. She hadn't joined Blackwatch by accident. She'd been curated, molded, tested, and every operation she'd survived had been another layer of programming. Until Thornvale, until a man begged for protection, and she didn't shoot. That was her flaw. She remembered too much. She left Delta Base that night, didn't sign out, didn't say goodbye, just vanished, the way ghosts are supposed to. But this time, she vanished on her own terms. She tracked Voss to a clinic in Marseille under a new name, Julian Ray, pediatric neurologist. A man now surrounded by laughter and children's drawings. But she knew better. She watched him for 3 days. Never spoke. Until the 4th morning. When he left for his morning run. And Reena stepped into his path. No weapon, just a question. Do you remember me? He froze. Eyes wide, but not in fear. In recognition. Veil 3, he said softly. Then, as if correcting himself, Reena, that was all she needed. He remembered. They sat in silence on a park bench for 20 minutes. Then he spoke. I wanted to pull you out after Kandar. You hesitated on that mission. I knew the conditioning wouldn't hold much longer. She turned to him. Thornvale was a test. He nodded. You were supposed to fail. A mercy kill, with a clean alibi. And the courier, Collateral. He had names. Yours. He didn't answer, which told her everything. She didn't threaten him, didn't raise her voice. She simply said, if I could find you, they can too. He looked down. Then handed her a slip of paper. No names. No codes. Just a phrase, echo frame. 7. That was all she needed. The last stone. The missing piece. Weeks passed. Reena didn't hide. She just moved. Country to country, border to border. Following whispers, back doors, dust trails. She never stayed long, never took shots. But everywhere she went, she asked the same question. Who's still pulling the trigger? And slowly, she saw the web. Saw the machinery. Saw the truth she already knew in her bones. The war wasn't about borders anymore. It was about beliefs, control. Control of what soldiers remember, what they forget, and most importantly, who gets to choose. One morning, in a quiet motel on the outskirts of Berlin, she recorded a message, a single, encrypted file, sent it to every Bacchanal she trusted. Former assets, burned agents, even a few journalists, too paranoid to ignore it. No commentary, no threats, just raw video from Thornvale, the uncut footage, and one sentence, spoken in her voice. If you were ever part of the silence, it's time to speak. She didn't wait to see what happened, didn't watch the fallout, because she wasn't looking for justice. She was planting memory, a seed, a bullet that couldn't be traced. Reena disappeared after that, fully. This time, some say she died crossing into Finland. Some say she's building a network of ex-operatives, ghosts like her. Others swear she's hunting Voss's successors, one name at a time. But none of that matters, because Reena never needed credit. She didn't fight for vengeance. She fought for one thing, to be remembered, not as a myth, not as a ghost, but as a soldier who chose not to forget. Stillness is not silence. Stillness is clarity.